Hello and welcome to the latest chat with one of the wonderful creators at New Haven Publishing. I'm very excited today because it's a chap I've known for many years, although we've rarely spoken like this. So I'm hoping I can bring him up in this magical world of technology. So I think, yeah, here we go. Let's do that. Well,
I'm here.
there. Now I'd better name you. And suddenly I struggle because immediately with my British brain, I say, oh, it's George. Do you prefer the Jorge, Mr. Pacheco?
I don't. Either one is fine, but I guess as an adult, I've gone more by Jorge. So I guess
Jorge it is. Jorge.
When you're a kid, you don't like to be called Jorge, but when you're an adult, you like it. So I guess I like George as a kid and Jorge as an adult.
Well, I'm hoping you have no difficulty with pronouncing my own name. But Jorge, it is for tonight, and it's lovely to see you. Now, remind me where you are.
Well, I lived most of my life in Southern California, San Diego, and Santa Monica. But 4 years ago, for some unknown reason, we moved to Lewiston, Idaho, in the middle of nowhere in a way. I followed my sister, and she's really the last family that we have. So we followed her, and we really like it here. It's great. I mean, the people are wonderful, and they're very supportive of what I do, and couldn't be happier.
Oh, that's fascinating. Well, so Liverpool connects with Idaho. I like that here today. We are living in an extraordinary world. And I better tell people just what you are. I mean, it's been a mighty career. In fact, I think you're coming up to 40 years, aren't you, in this very peculiar career to most people. To us, it's just another day.
Yeah, it is. In some ways, it's peculiar to me sometimes. Sometimes I don't know how I've made it this long. It's a difficult way to make a living, but it's also a passion. And I guess I can get into how I got started into it. I'm going to blame myself.
We'll do that. Yeah, I think we'll do that, Jorge. I think we'll because I'm relishing talking about your new book, the book that's come out from New Haven, well, from Viking Press Comics, which is a subsidiary of New Haven Publishing, because it is truly an extraordinary book. On so many levels, when I look at it, I mean, well, we'll come to that in a bit. But we're talking comic books today. Yeah. We're talking comic books, and we're talking comic book people, of which I think, any way you look at it, you are a comic book person. Does this go back to childhood? Is this, you talked about, you said the word passion. Does that passion come from your childhood?
It definitely comes from my childhood, and I was kind of born into it in a way in the arts. My biological father, unfortunately passed when I was very young, but he was a professor of art at Purdue University. And so he loved music and art. And so I guess I got part of that gene, but it's not just from my father. My mother, she also became a teacher. She was a Shakespeare major, so she taught high school theater, but she was also an art minor. So right there, it was all the arts, and my two passions in life are music. As I can see all the Beatles stuff behind you, that's one of my other passions is music.
Well, you know, if you go into any house in Liverpool, guaranteed to find Beatles all over the place.
Yes.
Yeah.
My father was also a musician, so unfortunately I didn't get that gene, but I got the love of music, and the Beatles are my all-time favorite band. And music and art to me is they coexist together for me, because as I was growing up, well, let me tell you how I got started in the comics. My stepfather owned a liquor store, which you're saying, how can that get you into comics? Well, I don't know if you remember, they used to have these old spinner racks at liquor stores and convenience stores. And there's my cat, by the way.
I noticed she's actually been in the background, and my whole attention has been focused on her.
Yes.
which is great. That's exactly what you
Yeah.
need as a writer, as an artist, I think.
Yeah,
Yes.
I absolutely love animals, and cats are my all-time favorites. I know we're getting off the subject a little, but I was literally born with a cat in my cradle. So one of the few things I remember about being a baby was my cat Sua would sleep with me. So anyway, now back to the comics. Anyway, my stepfather owned a liquor store and the spinner racks there. So he
Yeah, and
would,
of course I remember the spinner racks, because
yeah,
over here the spinner racks were only used for American comics.
oh,
And so you had to search out the shops that would have American comics, because they were difficult to track down. Those, there were only certain shops that had them. So when you walked into a newsagent over here and found a spinner rack, oh, it was just sheer joy, sheer
yeah.
joy.
Anyway, he would bring home damaged comic books that, he couldn't sell. And I remember the first 3 books he brought home like it was yesterday. It was the Jack Kirby, Where Monsters Dwell. So my big thing as a child, I loved the Universal monsters, Godzilla. And so here was this guy. I didn't know who Jack Kirby was, of course, but I looked inside the book and here are these giant monsters, Fing Fang Foom. And I was hooked. I must have read that.
Tubular.
Yeah, I
What
must have read that book
Tubular.
500 times.
Yes.
So anyway, and he brought home Kurt Swan Supermans. And the other one I really loved, what I got hooked on, was Creepy and Eerie magazine, which had this artist who, of course, as a kid, as a child, I'm 4 or 5 years old. You don't know who artists are. You just look at the book. And it happened to be Richard Corbin. And he was the one in the Creepy and Eerie magazine who would do these color sections. And I was just mesmerized. I mean, I'd never seen anything like it. And I was in love with the work. And if he'd bring home a Creepy or Eerie or Vampirella or whatever it may be, and there wasn't a Richard Corbin in it, I'd be disappointed. So
Was it the stories or was it the artwork that grabbed you?
It was definitely the artwork. Even as an adult, I still gravitate more to, I think comics to me are still a visual medium. Obviously, you want a good story. To me, if a comic book has a good story, it's a bonus. It's always been about the art with me. And there's certain artists, obviously we're talking Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and Gene Colan, Richard Corbin, Jack Davis. I could go on and on.
Please do.
Yeah, and Carl Barks and just all these great artists. When I see their work, there's something that kind of lights a spark under me, and I get very excited. But obviously, when you read something like a Carl Barks Duck Comics, it's not just beautifully drawn. The writing is clever. It's funny. It gives you a certain feeling, and there's certain the Jack King Kirby, Stan Lee Fantastic Four was probably my favorite book growing up. I would read those over and over. And then when I got older, the John Byrne X-Men, which was really the big book. I'll tell you, I went to the Joe Kubert School in Dover, New Jersey. And when we went there, John Byrne's X-Men was the big book. And everybody in the class was reading it. So it was definitely the flavor of the month, so to speak. And, those 2 books, the Jack Kirby and the John Byrne's, are really what pushed me towards doing comic books. But it wasn't just that, because as I said, I had parents who were in the arts, but of all things, my grandfather, when I was a little kid, and I don't know why, I still don't know why, he never told me, but he used to call me Charlie Brown. And I have no idea why, but obviously as a little kid, I would read the comic strips, and Charlie Brown and Snoopy were my absolute favorites. So he would call me Charlie Brown, and I liked it because I love Charlie Brown. So it kind of stuck as a kid. And I was fortunate enough, actually, when I graduated from the Kubert School, I got my first big job, which was funny. It was called Blackthorn Comics, which is a very independent publisher. And it was in the same hometown that I was in. It was in El Cajon, California.
You're leaping ahead, rather. Can I take you back to your childhood? And so you're reading comics. You immediately pick up a pencil?
Yes, I picked up a pencil because it was weird. Of course, as a kid, you think there's one artist, right? There's one artist doing all these comics, but I would literally, which every artist I've ever talked to, what professional, even hobbyists, they look at other people's work and they mimic it. So I would mimic Jack Kirby's work. I'd mimic Steve Ditko's work. I'd mimic Charles Schultz's work, you know, whoever it may be. And I love this other artist who used to work for Mad Magazine called Don Martin. And I used to have this, it was kind of like a graphic novel before graphic novels were a big deal. And I would carry it around in the 3rd grade. And I was so proud, you know, that I had this Don Martin book. I thought I was the coolest cat on this, you know, on the planet. And, you know, I would draw Don Martin comics, you know, all day.
Yeah, he was. There was just so much talent, wasn't there? And it was so varied. The styles were quite extraordinary, and that's not even bringing in British comics, which of course you would not have been getting over there. But over here, you know, they would be weeklies, weekly comics, and there just was. You didn't know what to expect from page to page.
That's very cool.
It was an exciting time to grow up. I don't know, maybe most people feel that about their own childhood, but I feel there was something particularly exciting, certainly about growing up in the 50s and then early 60s for myself, and a little later for yourself. So you're drawing. What kind of things were you drawing then to begin with?
Well, like I said, I was a monster fan, Universal Monsters and Godzilla and Mothra and all these kind of, you know, horrific things. I kind of liked horror as a kid. I guess a lot of boys like that, and dinosaurs, of course. So I was kind of drawing dinosaurs and monsters, but, you know, I loved Peanuts so much that I would draw Charlie Brown and Snoopy. So, you know, I might have Charlie Brown riding a dinosaur, you know, and so that would make me happy. Or, you know, as a kid, you know, maybe have a dinosaur eating Snoopy or something, which probably isn't very nice, but kind of funny as a kid. But
it's no crazier than Snoopy fighting the Red Baron, is it really?
That is my absolute favorite, is when Snoopy fights the Red Baron. I just absolutely love that. When I see that, it just makes me laugh. And I know that your family, you know, had a big history in World War I and II, and I'm kind of an enthusiast of the wars. And so Snoopy fighting the Red Baron to me was just the coolest thing. My all-time favorite book.
I mean, where on earth does an idea like that come from? It's one of those amazing things, isn't it? Where you are just left in awe at these extraordinary talents, that these ideas come to them. And then they actually think, yeah, okay, I'll make that work. Where it's perfect. It is perfect timing with the cat's tail.
Yeah, the cat's tail.
It's perfect. So now on to Joe Kubert then, because over here, of course, you know, I would read about his school and think, my gosh, you know, if only I could get over there. What was that like? Because obviously a huge name in comics himself. Did the school live up to my vision of it?
Oh, it was unbelievable. I mean, when you're a young person, obviously you don't. I think in life, the happiest times of your life are the times you don't know you're having the happiest times of your life. And I remember I had kind of I guess you would say, a difficult childhood. And one of the things that really saved me was comic books. And I saw this ad in, you know, comics that what Joe Kubert School. And so I said, I got to go here. I said, Mom, I want to go here. And my mom was very supportive, but I was a little bit of a mama's boy. And there were a lot of factors because of that. So to be honest, I was surprised that she let me go from California to Dover, New Jersey. You know, I'd never really been out of California. And so
what age were you when you went?
I went at 18. I, you know, graduated high school, and then I was 18 years old. So, you know, I was a dopey kid. You know, I was still a dopey kid. And a lot of people say I'm still a dopey adult, but that's another story. Anyways.
That's quite an achievement, I think. If one can remain dopey through one's life.
Yeah. So so anyway, so I go to the Kubert School, and I remember the first day like it was yesterday. I get there and it's a whole different world. Of course, the weather is completely different and the people are different, but it was magic. It really was. There was something about it that I instantly fit in, but I guess it's because everybody there wanted to draw comics. So we instantly had a bond that maybe you don't have at some other schools. So it was very special. And obviously the people that I met there, I still am very good friends with them. I mean, they're all spread all over the United States for the most part, but, with Facebook, and I've worked with some of the artists, that have graduated with me and stuff. But when we got there, we were the last year that the school was in the mansion. It was actually in an old mansion. And so it was really cool because we'd have this, it was basically a little bit, I work in our old garage. We set a studio. It's now a studio instead of a garage. It was a little bit bigger than this. And I don't know how many kids were in there, maybe 15 other artists. And so we were kind of jammed into this little room, and it was just very special. And the teachers were great. Obviously we had Joe Kubert. We had this artist, Jose Delbo, he was famous for doing the Superman comic strip in the paper and Wonder Woman. Tex Blaisdell, who was a famous inker. Let's see, Hy Eisman. He did the Popeye strip, the Katzenjammer Kids. And I know I'm forgetting Mike Chen, all these really, really great artists. So you're learning from these tremendous professionals, and you're just kind of gathering all this information. And to be honest with you, there was also another class. There were 30 students all together, and there was another room with 15 students. So it was split up, but I was not one of the better artists. I was probably middle bottom, but I hung with it. It's a 3-year trade school. The second year, they actually moved into the local high school. So there was more room and everybody was kind of in the same classroom, but it was still great. Having said that, it was really magic. I would have never become the artist I am today without the Kubert School. And it really was, I mean, I've recommended, I teach private lessons and I talked at schools, and, I recommend if anybody wants to become a comic book artist to go to the Kubert School, because it really gave me foundation to become the artist that I am today.
It's still running. The place is still running.
It's still running. And I really hope one day to get back, and I'd love to show my kids and my wife, the school that I went to, and show them the old mansion, because now the mansion's used as housing for the kids that go to the school. So I would really like to go back. And one of the funny things is, one of the first jobs that I got as a professional, this is kind of a funny one. As you know, we spoke that one of my favorite artists and inspirations was Charles Schulz. And so I was always drawing the Peanuts comic strip as a kid. And one of the assignments, Joe gave us an assignment to mimic their favorite comic strips. So for me, it was a no-brainer. I knew it was going to be Peanuts. So I did the job for, I just thought it was another assignment. And so I handed it in, and the whole class really liked it. It was, I'm a humble guy, but it was pretty darn good. And Joe looked at it and he says, "This is pretty damn good." Joe is a really funny guy. Anyway, so I didn't think much of it. And they have a gym downstairs, and the kids would play basketball between classes and at lunchtime. And so I'd do that. And then one of the kids came down from the office and said, "Joe Kubert wants to see you." And I'm all, "Oh crap, what did I do? I must be in trouble." I've always had a lot of guilt. I don't know. I would have made a good Jewish mother. I always joke about that. And I can say that because my ex-wife was Jewish, so I can say that. Anyway, so I go up to the office and I'm really worried. I said, "What did I do? I must have done something wrong." And Joe had picked me along with 3 other students to intern sort of for Jim Garfield Davis in Muncie, Indiana, to help him out with the strip for a couple weeks. And so because of Charles Schulz, I got work with Jim Davis, which,
how wonderful.
So it was unbelievable. I mean, I'm not kidding you, Tim. I was such a dopey kid that I didn't realize how great it was, and looking back, it was just unbelievable. The people, they had like 5 or 6 artists on staff, and Jim wouldn't be there most of the time. I only saw him twice.
Yeah, it's easy to forget just how big a strip that was.
Oh, it was enormous.
I mean, from anything else, it's global.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, that was 1987 that I went. So it was really at the pinnacle of, its fame. So I was kind of in the middle of it.
Well, I was living in Indiana at the time, and You heard about that studio every day. I was working at the Saturday Evening Post, but somebody would be talking about that studio all the time.
Uh,
It
it
just
was
was. I mean, it
unbelievable.
was a huge part of Indiana, but much bigger than Indiana.
Yes, yes. Well, I don't know if you know, I was born in Indiana, so that was the first time I'd been back to Indiana. So
I'm
I'm a
right.
Hoosier, and so it was really very special to go back to Indiana. And I
Yeah.
I absolutely loved Indiana, by the way. It kind of
Well,
reminds
me
me of
too.
Idaho. Yeah.
Me
The
too. And in fact, I consider myself a semi-Hoosier,
yeah.
possibly a Doctor Hoosier, but
Yeah.
I married into it, so
That's right.
it has a place in my heart. Bless it.
Yes. Beautiful ladies in Indiana. When I went back, I was, a young man, and I noticed all the Midwestern girls, how beautiful they were and how kind. So it
Yeah,
was it was
yeah.
really
Certainly, there was a kindness to everybody. Certainly, everybody I met over there in Indiana was incredibly sweet. It might have been because I was the only Englishman in the state, or seemingly the only Englishman, and
well,
so
I know you, Tim. You're a sweetheart, so I don't think anybody could be mean to you. So, but they were the Hoosier people were Indiana people were just they're unbelievable people, and that's kind of the way I feel like Idahoans is that I really didn't expect it. I mean, I guess what makes any state, country, whatever it may be special, it's not the things around, it's the people in it. It's the
yeah,
people in
of
it,
course, of course.
and it just sometimes you don't realize that when you're young, but I really had a great time those 2 weeks, and I still stay in touch with a few of the artists, and I'll just look at it as one of the highlights of my life, going to the Kubert School, and then working for Jim Davis. It was really a special time, and I'm still a young man. So then
Mm.
after that, then I moved back home to my, to be with my parents and to kind of
Was
start.
it Harvey Comics that came next?
No, the thing that came next was Blackthorn Comics,
Ah,
which, yeah, so Blackthorn Comics came next, and it was kind of funny because I didn't know anything about them, and all of a sudden I start seeing these comics, and then I read on the back of the comic, it's Elkhorn, California. Well, I live 2 miles away from them, so they
and
always kind of.
remind us what titles they were putting out at that time.
Well, that's when the black and white boom was crazy. That's when the Teenage Ninja Mutant Turtle thing turned off. So they had a lot of those kind of titles. The first book I ever did professionally was Bullwinkle and Rocky. So that was one of the books, and the Flintstones, and actually buddies of mine from the Kubert School, they had their own creator book, Roach Mill, that they did. Tom Hedden and Jim, I'm getting this wrong. Tom McWeeny and Rich Hedden were doing Roach Mill for them. So it's kind of funny. Buddies from my class had gotten to work with them.
Well, that's great, but never mind them.
Yeah,
Bullwinkle Rocky, you mentioned there.
yeah.
Again, legendary
No,
character.
it was. I mean, I grew up watching it. I mean, I didn't really talk.
Too. They actually the Rocky and Bullwinkle show hit over here in 1961. So I would have been about 8 years of age, and it had enormous impact, certainly on me. And I just loved the fact that a lot of it, there was no way that an 8-year-old English kid could possibly understand a lot of the political but it didn't matter because it was so fast paced, so hilarious, so beautifully performed, so beautifully drawn, beautifully written, that it just captured one's imagination as a child and made one want to know more. I felt made one want to know more about America, and its ups and downs. And who are these people they're referring to? If Bullwinkle suddenly starts talking about the Republicans,
Yes.
So fascinating stuff. So drawing that comic must have been quite something.
Oh, it was great. Everything you just said about Bullwinkle and Rocky is very true. As a child, you don't realize it's just funny. You kind of don't know why it's funny, but they're making fun of politicians and stuff like that. As an adult, obviously you get it's really, they were writing it for adults, yet the child would enjoy it. So that's what made it kind of special. But you don't know that until you get older. But it was kind of like a whirlwind. All this stuff was happening so quickly. And I was getting all this work with them, Bullwinkle and Rocky, the Flintstones, Underdog. I thought, you know, everyone said how hard it was going to be to make it as an artist. And that, you know, and I was making, I think, I don't know, $35, $40 a page. And, you know, at that time I thought, God, I'm going to be a millionaire in no time. Right. So, you know, and I'm doing all the artwork. I'm doing the pencils, the inks, and the lettering. And, you know, I was just in heaven. And then unfortunately the black and white, you know, boom, it busted. So all these companies went out of business, which Blackthorn was one of them. And so then I found myself out of work. So this was the first time that I'd, you know, not had work. And so I'm looking for comic, and this is obviously long before the internet. So I'm sending everything through the mail, trying to get work with companies. I'd, you know, write them and send them samples. And by the way, I think that's when we first, actually, when I was working at Blackthorn, is when I first, quote, met you, you know, when you work.
It is. I can't quite remember what brought that meeting about.
It was, I think it was the AIDS benefit book. The AIDS benefit.
Well, there you go. How interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's a story in itself, which I won't go into.
Yeah, I still have the letter you sent me, you know, thanking me, and I still have it. It was very meaningful. And so anyway, that's how we met. But anyway, back to, so I was the first time I was unemployed, and I thought, oh, it'll be no problem to get work. And then I went for about 1.5 2 years of not having much work. I'd do like little local stuff. I did stuff for a local bar, which was called Bullwinkle's of all things. And so I'd have Bullwinkle drinking beer and stuff. So that was kind of funny. I'd do little menus and stuff like that. So I'd get little odds and ends, but, you know, I was still living at home. So I didn't really have to worry about, you know, putting a roof over my head. But I said, you know, I can't live with mom forever. So I said, you know, what am I going to do? And I was getting worried that I wasn't getting work. So I said, well, I guess I'll become a teacher like my parents. You know, it's a great profession, and, you know, it's something to be proud of. I could be an art teacher like my father. And so I go back to the local, community college, and the first class I had was an art class. And I brought in my Bullwinkle pages and my Flintstone pages. And I was in the class for about 10, 15 minutes after the instructor gave his, you know, his first lecture. And I showed him the Bullwinkle and Flintstone pages. And it was hilarious. You know what he said to me? This is what made me quit. I literally quit college that same day. This is what he said to me. He looked at the work and he said, "What the hell are you doing here?" That's what he said to me. And
was that a positive or a negative?
Yes, it was a positive. I looked at it as a positive. So he said, "You should not be here." He said, "You should go be a comic book artist. That's what you love." And that day I quit college and I started looking again. Well, lo and behold, I'd sent samples to Harvey Comics. And this is a funny story too. I sent in copies of my work. I would call them on the phone. I must have bugged them, I'm not kidding you, 25 times. I called them like every day or every other day. I was driving them nuts. Finally, I think just to get rid of me, they said, "Come in and we'll interview you." So I was in San Diego and they were in Santa Monica, California. So it's about a 2.5 hour drive. So I drove up there, go to the offices, and it's beautiful. It's 100 Wilshire Boulevard, which is like prime real estate in Los Angeles. It's literally overlooking the water. So here I am, this kind of like little hillbilly dopey kid from El Cajon, California, in the big city for the first time. So I go in and there's this receptionist there, and she's just like stunningly beautiful, just gorgeous girl. I'm all, what am I getting myself into? So I go to meet the editor, and the editor completely forgot that I was coming in that day. So I talked to another editor, and he says, "Yeah, we really like your stuff. Why don't we put you up at the local hotel and we'll give you like a week's tryout?" And I'm all, why are they doing that if I'm going to be a freelance artist? Why are they putting me up in a hotel and stuff? So I said, okay, whatever. So I did that for about a week, 4 or 5 days. I go in the office and, do whatever work they had, covers or splash pages or ads, whatever they needed, I would do. And lo and behold, I didn't know, but it was a tryout to become staff artist at Harvey Comics. And I got the job. And it literally changed my life. And the funny thing is, this, I mean, when you're from San Diego and you're going to LA, nobody in San Diego likes Los Angeles, right? So I was kind of scared of Los Angeles. And my mom, who came up, and when we were looking for a place for me to stay, to live, you know, because I got the job, she says, now, she called me George. She says, George, now you're not going to live in Los Angeles too long, right? I said, Mom, I said, don't worry about it. I said, I know Los Angeles isn't very nice. I'll stay here maybe 1-2 years. I lived there 18 years. So that's the story. And Harvey Comics, I was in office for 5 years, and then unfortunately they no longer publish. They were bought out by Universal. But there's one funny story. Marvel Comics almost bought Harvey Comics.
Oh, really?
And what happened is that I met Stan Lee, and this is how I met Stan Lee. The editor at Harvey Comics was Sid Jacobson.
Yeah.
He's kind of like a famous guy
He is.
Yeah, in comics history. He was my boss. I
knew Sid myself. It's really interesting. Yeah, carry on. Yeah.
But anyway, I'm going to make a little backtrack to kind of a funny thing. The day that I graduated from the Kubert School, it was actually on my birthday. And the next day I went into New York to try to get a job at Marvel Comics. And the editor for the kids line was Sid Jacobson.
It's a star comic.
Yeah. So the funny thing is I went in to go see Sid, and I'd made the appointment and all this. He also forgot that I had the appointment. So I actually met with his, I guess, his assistant. And anyway, she loved my work, and she gave me a tryout on the Heathcliff comic book, which of course is somewhat close to Garfield. So I did the tryout for it. I sent it I'd moved back down to San Diego. I sent it to New York.
Somewhat close, as in a complete ripoff.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, I thought, I was really proud. I thought I did a great job on the Heathcliff. And of course I didn't get the job. Sid didn't give me the job, and I still have the rejection slip. So the funny thing is the one that hired me at Harvey Comics was Sid Jacobson. And he'd forgotten that he'd rejected me at Marvel. So it was kind of a big circle. Anyway, so once Harvey, well, now I got to go back to my Stan Lee. So anyway, Sid Jacobson knew Stan Lee, and he didn't like him. But anyway, he didn't like him. But anyway, so the boss who...
Did you know why?
I don't know why. He never really said. But the funny thing is Sid was in comics for so long that he actually, when he worked for Harvey, like in the 40s, I guess it was, he worked with Jack Kirby. And Jack Kirby called Sid, because he was so young, he was like 20, 21 at the time. He called Sid Jacobson Kid Editor, is what he called him. Kid Editor. So Sid told me some stories about Jack Kirby, which I really liked. But now back to the Stan Lee. Anyway, so my boss, who was actually 1 year younger than me, I think I was 27, 28 at the time. He was like 25, 26. We were meeting with Stan Lee, and I didn't know the reason why, but it was because Stan Lee was meeting with him to buy Harvey Comics. So I go to lunch, and my buddy in the art department, Brian Selzer, who was my best buddy, we all had lunch with Stan Lee, and Stan was a great guy. I really enjoyed him. All he did was talk about himself, but everybody listened. It was really fun. So, but at the very end of the lunch, he came up to me, because like I said, I was 27, 28 years old. He said, "Young man," he said, "what is your boss's name again?" Because he wanted to thank him for lunch. He'd forgotten Jeff's name. So that was one of the things I remember about the lunch. But obviously, Marvel never bought Harvey. Universal ended up buying it. But then I still lived in Los Angeles for another 13 years. I was married once before, and I had a lot of freelance work. I started doing children's books. I was still doing comic books. I did a publisher that did Scud Comics. I don't know if you heard of Scud Comics.
I might have, but you might have noticed the grey hair. So
I got that too. So
here we go.
You got a little bit more mop top than me, but I still got it. See this ponytail? It's really mine anyway.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
So
we've got to be proud about something.
So then lo and behold, I ended up unfortunately getting divorced. So I moved back down to San Diego, and I moved. My mom was happy about it, of course. She was happy about that. So I remarried, and I started doing freelance work again. And I told my wife Sabina, I told her what a comic book artist does. And it's hard to explain to anybody what a comic book artist does, because what a comic book artist does is they work 10 to 14-hour days, and they make $10 to $14 a day. That's what they do. Okay? That's what they do. And no one believes it. No one believes it. And the thing is,
this must have made you irresistible to it.
Yeah, of course. I'm quite a catch.
Yes.
But the thing is that I'm a tremendously hard worker, and I'm very dedicated. And like I said, I absolutely love what I do. So that's what makes it all worthwhile. But she didn't believe it. She did not believe it. So we get married. She starts living with me. Of course, we're living together. And I'm trying to get more work, because as a comic book artist, you don't want one job, you want 3 jobs, you want 4 jobs. So the first time I got a job, I'm looking for more work, and I'm already working my 10 to 14-hour day. She's all, "What are you doing?" She says, "You already have a job. You're already working your butt off." I said, "Honey," I said, "this is going to dry up. There's not going to be more work. You never know if you're getting another job." So for me, it's always trying to have 2, 3, 4 jobs at the same time and juggling it.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work that way, but now she believes me. But really, the way I make my living, which is kind of crazy, like I said, I teach private art lessons. I do caricatures for weddings, for school dances, for proms, and I speak at libraries. I speak at, colleges, middle schools, high schools, whatever. So really, I make my living outside of comics, but still related to it.
Yes, sure. Everything connects, doesn't it? Really,
Yeah.
Everything that you do does, in many ways, connect back to the comics.
Yeah, so it connects back to the comics, but obviously my passion. Right now, I'm actually looking for work. This is probably the first time in 10, 15 years that I haven't really. I actually have a job coming in today, which I guess I can talk about. It's for Dynamite Comics, but I'm actually not doing comics. I'm going to do Transformer trading cards.
Oh, right.
So that'll be kind of a fun job, because I enjoy Transformers. And I just like, the funny thing about me is I really don't care what I draw. I mean, there are things that I like drawing more than others, which probably my favorite thing to draw still is monsters, monsters and dinosaurs. If I have a chance to put a monster or a dinosaur in the story, I'm doing it. So, but, doing the Transformer will be awesome. And, I can't complain. But I guess we should get to my book.
Well, I was about to say, we should get to, before we become deceased.
Yes.
We should talk about it. When I first saw it, I thought, what on earth? Well, there it is. And a gorgeous looking cover it is,
Yes.
but slightly shocking. And the only reason I was slightly shocked, if there is such a thing as being slightly shocked, was because of all the nonsense that I've had from a lot of publishers in the past, a lot of children's publishers, who will immediately say to me, "Oh, I think we've got to be careful here. We don't want to offend somebody. And, we've got to be very careful in what we present for children." And I've never agreed with that. I've always thought the last thing we need to do is be careful. We need to grab the imagination and shake everything up. Having said that, when I saw the title of this, and indeed the zombies rampaging across the cover, I thought, hang on a minute, this is a long way from Harvey Comics. Except then I thought, well, actually it isn't, is it? Because Harvey was full of Casper, the little ghost, and Spooky, and Wendy.
Hot Stuff, the little devil.
Let's not forget Hot Stuff. And what an extraordinary character to be presented in comic book form for the children of America. One would have thought somebody would have been complaining about putting a little devil up as a child's comic book.
And Wendy the Good Little Witch.
Wendy the Good Little Witch as well, yeah. I mean, glorious comics. And you can have no idea the impact they had over here. Although I think my favorite Harvey comic as a child was Sad Sack. Sad Sack with I just loved all his relations, especially Slob Sack, I think he
Yeah.
was a cousin or something, and Sadie. So seeing this for the first time, I was like, well, this is something else.
Yes.
From the title on, this is a really immediately my curiosity was piqued. A comic book, which I assume is aimed at kids, although I suspect it's aimed at the child in us all.
Yes.
Much like Bullwinkle and Rocky, you said before, they're aimed at adults. For me, yeah, except in that no matter how old I get, there's still this 7, 8, 9-year-old kid in here who wants to be entertained. And so it irritates me at times when people say, oh, well, that's not aimed at you, is it? It's aimed at children. And I think, well, there's a child in here who still wants the entertainment that I got from comic books when I was a child. And indeed, Rocky and Bullwinkle being perhaps the best example of that. Yes. So tell me, I'm sure you've got the blurb paragraph off by heart now. To sell Dee-Ceased to our wonderful public. Who do you see it as being aimed at?
Well, I would say elementary school, maybe high school, but I think exactly what you said is correct, because I think the worst thing that you can do is write down to the children's level. Yeah. Make children think, make children work. I know as an adult, everything you said, I love comics, not maybe. I know more than I did as a child. Yeah. And part of it is because it brings me back to childhood. I, as you can probably see around me, Tim, I have comics and books. I mean, this is my studio. There's hundreds of comics and books, and half the reason I enjoy getting comics is because it reminds me of my childhood.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, my mom passed many years ago, but part of it, my mom was very supportive of me becoming a comic book artist, and would buy me comics. And, she bought me these Power records, which had a comic book in it. And unfortunately, I had a fire many years ago and I lost my whole collection. I mean, thousands of comic books, maybe 15,000 comics, including obviously all the books that she bought me. So slowly I've been getting my collection back up, and I've been buying these Power records. And every time I buy a Power record, it reminds me of my mom. Mm. And I never want to lose that. I don't want to lose that child inside me, because if you really know me, I'm still a child. This gray hair on top might fool people, but
no, I agree. I don't know what's happening here.
Exactly.
I think, who's that? Look, and you're talking about your mother, and I just reached to the left there, and here's a book Mum gave me. Within reach, you see. Yeah. So we're in a very similar, although we're miles apart, we're in a very similar room. This being my office with 10,000 comic books and books all over the place. Dee-Ceased.
But anyway, back to Dee-Ceased. So yeah. I never want to write down to children. I want to write up to them. I want to write up to the adult, but I want the 99-year-old guy to enjoy it. I want the 5-year-old kid maybe not understanding it, but maybe enjoying the pictures and I'm going to read you. I have it behind me. Let me get it real quick. Let's see where it is. Maybe I left it on my table. Well, anyway, maybe I don't have it, but let's see. 2 pages.
Yes, this is my. I have a very similar filing system here.
Yeah.
Maybe it's over there. Maybe it's over here.
Okay, here it is. Here it is. This is actually what I sent to Teddy. This is the story. It's literally called Story Synopsis, and this is Story Synopsis for Dee-Ceased. This is what it's all about. The whole underlying story of Dee-Ceased is the love and importance of family and community, and being kind to everyone. Along the way, the readers will learn about famous people in history, past and present, through Rory's quotes. Every few pages, a famous quote will be used with a description in a box and a brief bio about the person making the quote at the bottom of the page. The story takes place in my former hometown of San Diego. And anyway, so that's what it's about. The underlying story of Dee-Ceased is family, community, and being kind to everybody. Now,
as seen through the eyes of
well, as Dee-Ceased, she's the one. I mean, the family, it's the whole family that they're kind to the whole community. The father happens to be very wealthy, so he's always giving back. He's giving back to the local museum. He's giving back to the homeless. You know, all these things I have in the book. It's telling about her story becoming this, I call her a supernatural superhero. But it's also about loving one another. It's about all these cultures. There's the Japanese culture. There's Native American culture. So we have that in the book too. So it's much more than blasting zombies. It's not really about that. But I understand, you know, even in my little pea brain, the word Dee-Ceased, what do you think? You know, what is the first thing you think? But hopefully, once you read 2 or 3 pages in the book, you'll know it's really not about that. It's about loving one another. That's what Dee-Ceased is about.
Well, you mentioned famous people that pop up, and the story of famous people. Can you name some of those people? Because I have to say, it's quite a list.
Yes, we have Vincent van Gogh, my favorite artist. We have Winston Churchill, obviously famous in your neck of the woods. We have Martin Luther King. We have Rosa Parks. We have Anne Frank. We have Chief George Dan George. So those are just Helen Keller. I mean, many more. Those are just the ones that are popping off my head. So you're reading this story about Dee-Ceased, yet you're learning about these famous people in history. So, you know, that's what I call it, 3 books in one. It's a comic book. It's a chapter book because there's parts in it where there's quite a bit of writing, and then it's a learning tool. So it's 3 books in one.
Yeah, you say it's a learning tool. That seems a great way of getting young people reading as well.
Yes.
So that it can go from comic to text, and hopefully the pictures therein encouraging them to read on. And before they know it, guess what? They love reading because they're coming away with a great story.
You kind of get tricked into learning something. They don't know. They say, hey, I'm reading about this girl who's going to blast zombies, but what's Winston Churchill doing here? What's Martin Luther King? What's John F. Kennedy doing in this book? You know, and it all ties in together, you know. So it's something I literally created Dee-Ceased, and the protagonist in the book his name is Mr. Marrow. I literally created these characters in high school. So I created these characters. It took me, well, almost 40 years to get this on into a book, you know. Yeah. So, and Teddy was incredible to work with. It was really odd because I've written stuff before, you know, 8 pages here, 10 pages here, 3 pages, 2 pages. I've written Laurel and Hardy comics. I've written for Cartoons Magazine, you know, just little things here and there, nothing too big. And here it is, a 30-page comic. I'd never written anything like that. So it was quite a challenge, but I wrote out this long synopsis and I sent it to Teddy, and she is a funny editor because she didn't edit. She didn't literally, even the name, like you said, Dee-Ceased, it's a funny name. So I didn't know what she was going to think. She didn't say anything about it. I wrote the story. I gave her the comic. She didn't have one editorial change.
Is that not wonderful? I mean, you know, I've worked for so many publishing houses where I've come away feeling in fact, I've even heard an editor say, well, I have to be seen to be doing something. And so they will edit the hell out of people's work rather than, I have to say, working as an editor myself, I've always gone the route of choosing the right people for the job and then letting them get on with it. And so that's like, in the case of comic books, choosing the right artist whose work will be compatible with the right writer, and then allowing them to inspire each other to do their finest work, rather than something that I find way too many editors who will do. They want to put their mark on it themselves. Well, the best mark I feel you can leave as an editor is that it becomes the work of the artist and writer. And that in turn will be a huge tick alongside your name as an editor. If you do that. But no, Teddy is quite remarkable in that. But she has a great eye for talent, and recognizes that when she brings them in, that the trick is to let them do what they do best. So yeah, it's interesting hearing you talk like that about her, because that was my feeling exactly.
It was really wonderful working with her. Well, you're the main reason that I picked her, because I know obviously you've done a handful of books with her, and I said, well, if Tim Quinn's working with her, she can't be all bad, right? So,
I don't know that those two points go together too well, but anyway, from me and indeed from her.
So that was the main reason I looked into her, is because of you. So
well, that's great. Well, I'm delighted to hear that. Yeah, I think it's I'm certainly proud to be part of her catalogue, which is fascinating. You know, the books that they have out on popular culture, and now comic books as well, is I find it's brought to me the excitement that I used to have working in publishing, and which I lost somewhere along the way, due to just changing times, I guess. So it's in some ways it's old school, but it's very much of today as well. So it's the best of both worlds there. So.
Yeah, I really hope that this book, you know, kids will pick up. And obviously in today's society, it's harder than ever to get, you know, children especially, or anybody to read. I saw this thing that most parents, you know, once you're out of college, people never read again, you know. So
I'm living in a town here just outside Liverpool called Southport. And when we moved here, when Jane and I moved here back in 2009, there were 8 bookshops in this little town, tiny little town. There's now 1 bookshop. That's in that short period. So it says something about the times they are changing, and not necessarily for the better, but all the more reason for us to be doing what we're doing, and indeed encouraging young people to find that joy and that passion that you spoke about at the start of this, because it's still there, because comics are timeless.
Yes.
Although they can capture a period like nothing else, you know, I suspect that if I were to give you a comic from any period in the last 150 years, you'd probably be able to say, I bet that's from such and such a period. You know, there's something about comic books and comic book artwork that does that. So all the more reason for pushing and encouraging and getting books such as Dee-Ceased into school libraries. Because without a doubt, as soon as kids see the cover, they're going to be picking it up.
Yes.
And you know, the battle is over as soon as you do that, as soon as you've got them actually doing that, because guess what? They're going to come away as a reader.
Well, one of the big hooks is, like I said, if you look at the cover, like you said, there's a big hook to it. And I'm a big double page spread guy. And so, you know, from the Jack Kirby double page spreads in his books, and I have 3 double page spreads, you know, the cover, the second and third page, and then towards the back, this whole thing was written so I get dinosaurs in it too. So I have a big museum scene where it's a double page spread of these dinosaurs in the museum. So this is the cover. Obviously, it's a double page spread.
It is wonderful. I mean, that you know, could be framed, couldn't it? It'd make a beautiful poster as well.
So, you know, for me, when people look at the book, you know, obviously I'm kind of known for a lot of detail, and every panel has 10,000 things going on, because I think it's exciting to see that. That's what, when I think of Jack Kirby or someone like Sergio Aragonés, of course, or George Perez, when you look at their work, there's so much going on and so much imagination that it just hooks you into the story. And hopefully the art and the story in my book are probably, hopefully, equally important. So if I can get them in visually, hopefully I can get them in reading wise, you know, mentally.
Yeah, absolutely. So next project is Transformers, trading cards.
Yeah.
And after that, it's the life of the cartoonist, I guess.
Yeah, the life of the cartoonist, looking for work. So if anybody out there, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely.
But I'm hoping, obviously, the book takes off. I'm hoping that, hopefully another publisher, or I don't know what's going to happen with Teddy. I don't know. I'd love to have it as a regular comic book series. If there's a publisher out there that would like to obviously publish the book as a regular ongoing book, I think it would be awesome.
Yeah, well, just your talking about it there, that there's so much in it that obviously can't be contained in a mere 30 plus pages.
Yeah,
there's more to the story, more to come. Well, that's really interesting. Well, look, Jorge, we could talk all night
we could
on this subject that is very close to our hearts. I look forward to shouting out more and more about this particular book, Dee-Ceased. And certainly when I go into schools over here, I will be encouraging school librarians to go in search of it from New Haven, from Viking Press. And indeed, anybody else out there watching this, please do go to the New Haven Publishing website and see more close-up images from the book and more description of it. And indeed, order yourself a copy, because if you're into comics, if you're into stories, if you're into art, if you're into good writing, and if you've got kids, or if you are a kid yourself, deep down, this book is for you. Christmas is coming, and after that, so is Easter.
Yeah, there's a faith. It's faith-based too. There's a faith base in it too. So it's not overly, I wouldn't call it religious, but there's a little faith in it. So it's kind of nice.
Yeah, well, it was an interesting collection of people, from Anne Frank to JFK and Vincent van Gogh. They're people with certainly their backstory is fascinating. And indeed, if I were to go into a classroom and have to talk about a historical character, any of those that you mentioned, it would be very easy to talk about off the top of my head for an hour. I think that's a fascinating choice of characters, and characters who perhaps aren't taught in school enough.
Well, I knew about all these. Obviously, all these people are, I guess I would call them heroes of mine. And, I knew, quite a bit about a lot of them. But to be honest, the two that really I learned the most about and was just amazed about was John F. Kennedy and Rosa Parks. I knew things about them, but I really dug into their background and their life. And it was just, all these people that I wrote about are remarkable people. But they just really, it just was unbelievable what kind of people they really were. And so I learned something from it, and I hope that, those who read the book will learn something. And the whole thing is, it's like a little snippet or a cliff note almost of these people in time. And hopefully people, of all ages will say, who is this Rosa Parks? Maybe they'll dig into her life more, hopefully maybe they'll read a real book, on her biography. So I'm hoping that my book encourages, people of all ages to read even more, to learn about history, these people, that was really one of the main driving forces for me writing the book.
Yeah. The book is Dee-Ceased. It's available from New Haven Publishing's Viking Press Comics. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it, I'm sure, just about anywhere. Go in search of it tonight. Christmas is coming, as I said, but so is Tuesday. Any day will do. Buy the book and buy several copies if you know several children, or indeed treat yourself. Jorge, it's been a joy to sit here and chat. Absolute joy. Please keep on keeping on. Joyous work, and I look forward to seeing ever more as the years go on, as indeed they seem to be doing at this moment. All the very best from England, and Beatles, hey, come on over and I will give you the Beatle tour of Liverpool.
I just want to thank you, Tim. you know, we've done a little bit of work together, and obviously we have going back to the Saturday Evening Post, and you're a true gentleman, and it's just been a pleasure talking to you also. And, you know, I feel like, you know, we're buddies, you know, and I really hope one of my other passions in life, you know, I like music and art. My other passion is tennis. So I hope one day to go see Wimbledon, and, you know,
Oh,
obviously, so that's one of my things I'd really like to do. And obviously seeing, you know, Liverpool where the Beatles were, I'd like to see that, obviously. So I
it's
really
still
want,
here.
yes. So I really want to get over and meet you in person, and, you
I
know,
look forward to the day.
and thank
All the very best to you. All the very best to America.
I'm raising my cup of tea to you
Well,
and all
I'm
those people in the
to
YouTube.
raise Jane's cup of tea, which is
Yeah.
already very festive. So all the very best to you. Oh,
Cheers.
take care. Cheers is the word.